I knew from the first day I walked into the lecture hall that I didn't belong there. The air smelled faintly of sterilized metal and something sweet, probably the aroma filters running in overdrive to keep the different species comfortable. Dozens of eyes, none of them human, tracked me as I crossed my seat. Some glowed faintly. Others blinked sideways. A few didn't blink at all. The seating was tiered, each section modified for a specific physiology. High moisture basins for aquatic students, padded perches for the avians, reclining gel pods for those who didn't tolerate gravity well. My seat was a rigid composite slab with a built-in desk, standard for bipeds. No one sat within 2 seats of me. This was a galactic academy of interdisciplinary sciences, the crown jewel of higher learning for the civilized galaxy. Admission was competitive beyond belief. I'd fought for my place through standardized tests, endurance assessments, psychological profiling, and a dozen interviews. Most of my classmates came from civilizations that had been part of the Galactic Union for millennia. Humanity had joined barely 30 years ago, and outside of military or exploratory work, we were still a novelty. They didn't know what to make of us, but they thought they did. I heard the whispers on that first day. Death Worlder. The word wasn't said with awe. It was said like you describe a dangerous animal in a cage. The term came from our planet's classification. Category Red, lethal biosphere, hyperdation ecosystem, extreme seasonal variation, frequent natural disasters. Most intelligent species came from stable, relatively safe environments. The fact that humans evolved in the planetary equivalent of a war zone was the main reason we were considered unpredictable and dangerous. The instructor entered, an imposing figure with a long, plated neck and deep, resonant voice. Professor Valren had taught xenobiology for over 2 centuries and claimed to have cataloged every known sentient physiology in the Union. He greeted each student in their native tongue, even mine, though his pronunciation was stiff. He welcomed me as representative of Homo sapiens, and I could feel a few students glance over as if I might bark or bare my teeth. The lectures were dense with data and theories, and I absorbed them quickly. Humans had a knack for pattern recognition and rapid learning, something we developed for survival back home. But my speed only made some of the others resent me more. They didn't like that I didn't defer to their centuries of tradition. One afternoon, during a break, I overheard 2 students talking near the hydration station. Both were from low-gravity worlds, tall and slender, with translucent skin. One asked if I had brought my primitive tools for the upcoming skill demonstration. The other laughed, suggesting I'd probably show them how to hit things with sticks. I didn't react. There's no winning if you take the bait too early. The skill demonstration was part of a survival module. Each student would present a unique ability from their home world, something culturally significant, ideally impressive. Most of the class was already buzzing about their projects. A reptilian student planned to show regenerative tissue repair by deliberately wounding themselves and healing in minutes. An avian was demonstrating an advanced navigational sense in three-dimensional air currents. My own plan was modest, a simple knot tying and load-bearing display, practical, efficient, and harmless. But as the days went by, the remarks increased. They didn't see my restraint as professionalism. They saw it as proof that humans were unimpressive without our violent history. The Union liked to remind us of that history in textbooks, with plenty of emphasis on our wars. They always skipped over the parts about cooperation, endurance, and innovation. Professor Valren often called on me to compare human biology to other Death World-adjacent species. I answered concisely, but each time I could feel the class weighing my words. My heartbeat, my breathing, my posture, everything was under scrutiny. They wanted to confirm their theories about me. The day before the demonstration, we had a practical lab in environmental adaptability. The lab was set to simulate various hazards and controlled bursts, temperature shifts, gravity fluctuations, atmospheric composition changes. Most species handled their preferred range well, but faltered outside it. Humans are generalists. We don't excel in a single environment. We survive in many. I adapted quickly, and that earned more side glances. That night, as I reviewed my notes, I considered whether I should change my demonstration, show them something more direct. I dismissed the thought. I was here to learn, not to intimidate. Besides, the Academy's code of conduct was strict about excessive displays of force. I intended to stay well within it. The morning of the demonstration, the lecture hall was buzzing. Seats were rearranged to give a clear view of performance space. Students cycled through their presentations one by one, earning polite applause. Then it was my turn. At least, it should have been. That's when it happened. A fellow cadet, Urine, a tall, quadrupedal mammal from a high-gravity world, stepped forward before my name was called. He was smiling in the way predators do when they think they're in control. In one of his upper hands, he held a containment sphere, a small device used to carry live specimens for study. I recognized a faint chittering from inside. Whatever was in there, it wasn't harmless. "I thought we could make the humans' test more authentic," he said, loudly enough for the whole hall to hear. The professor frowned but didn't intervene immediately. Demonstrations often had a level of unpredictability. Urine triggered the sphere, and a small, agile creature shot out, a specimen from the lethal moon Osiris, known for hyperaggression and a venomous bite. The thing moved fast. Too fast for most of the species in the room to react. It darted between legs and tables, skittering toward the nearest movement, a young aquatic student whose mobility on land was poor. I saw the trajectory in an instant. No one else had moved yet. My brain didn't wait for permission. My body was already in motion, desk clattering behind me as I cleared the space in 3 strides. The creature leaped, and I intercepted it midair, my hand closing on the back of its neck with precision. Its momentum slammed into my arm, but I absorbed it, twisting to avoid its snapping jaws. I slammed it to the floor, pinning it under my knee before it could orient itself again. The hall went silent, except for the thing's muffled hissing. I could feel my pulse in my ears, but my breathing was steady. I applied just enough pressure to immobilize it without crushing vital structures. Handling small aggressive predators wasn't new to me. The aquatic student stared at me, wide-eyed, gill fronds fluttering erratically. I nodded once to show they were safe. Only then did the professor step forward, voice low but resonant. "Release it into containment." I lifted the creature by the scruff, still writhing, and dropped it into the reinforced sphere. The locking field shimmered back to life. My hands were unmarked, though I could feel where the muscles in my forearm had strained against the creature's thrashing. The air in the hall felt heavier after I sat down. No one spoke, not even the quiet, gossipy tones that usually fill the pauses between demonstrations. I could feel the weight of dozens of stares. Urine had been escorted out by 2 assistants, still protesting that it had only been a harmless test, that the containment creature was small, that I was overreacting. The professor didn't answer him. When the door closed behind them, Valren's gaze lingered on me for a moment too long before he resumed the schedule. The remaining demonstrations were subdued. A few students fumbled their presentations, distracted by what they'd just seen. The applause was perfunctory. I kept my expression neutral, jotting notes in my pad as though nothing unusual had happened. Pretending normalcy is an old survival trick. It makes others question whether the event was as extraordinary as they thought, but I could see it in their body language. A few leaned away from me now. Others kept glancing over, as though I might spring from my seat. After class, Valren asked me to stay behind. His tone was polite, but the underlying formality made it clear this wasn't a casual conversation. We waited until the room was empty. He folded his plaited arms and asked, "Was that standard for your species?" I considered lying, but decided against it. "Yes," I said. "That was just training and reflex." His frill shifted, a small movement that among his kind signaled unease. He wanted to know how I'd moved that fast without injury, how I'd known where the creature would go, how I'd subdued it without lethal force. I explained briefly. Observation trajectory, interception point, controlling the head to avoid the bite, neutralizing the body's leverage. It was all mechanics. His eyes narrowed slightly as though the simplicity disturbed him more than any exotic explanation would have. He dismissed me with a slow nod and told me the incident would be reported to the Academy Council. By the time I stepped into the main corridor, the rumors had spread. Students in distant wings who hadn't been in the hall were already staring as I passed. I caught fragmented conversation, Words like predator reflex, death world conditioning, dangerous. Some sounded impressed. Others sounded alarmed. The walk back to my quarters felt longer than usual. That night, my console pinged with a formal summons from the council for the next morning. The message was brief. Attendance mandatory. Discussion regarding recent classroom incident. Potential review of human behavioral integration. I slept lightly, listening to the hum of the air system. The council chamber was smaller than I expected, more like a conference room than a courtroom. 9 members sat around a crescent table, representing a variety of species and disciplines. Val Wren was present, standing to the side. They asked me to recount the event in detail, from the moment urine released the creature to its return to containment. I gave them the facts without embellishment. No dramatics, no defensiveness. One of them, a short, insectoid being with compound eyes, asked whether I considered letting someone else act. I told them there was no time. Another, from a gas-breathing species, wanted to know if I calculated the risk to myself. I told them humans calculate differently. We weigh potential injury against potential loss of life, and in that instant the equation was clear. They conferred quietly, their languages overlapping into a low hum of clicks, tones, and ultrasonic pulses. When they addressed me again, it was with a proposal. Given the growing presence of humans in the Union and the curiosity surrounding our adaptation to high-threat environments, they wanted to schedule a controlled demonstration of human capabilities. Voluntary, they said, but I could read between the lines. Refusal would brand me uncooperative. Agreement would put me under a microscope. I asked for parameters. They promised no lethal scenarios, no uncontrolled variables, just a staged sequence to display physical and cognitive responses. They wanted the student body and faculty to attend. It would be recorded for archival and research purposes. I agreed, knowing this was less about research and more about managing perception. In the days leading up to the demonstration, the atmosphere around me shifted. Some students avoided me entirely. Others sought me out, asking questions about human sports, military training, wilderness survival. I answered when it was genuine curiosity and deflected when it was veiled probing. I knew some were fishing for weaknesses. One evening, on my way to the nutrition wing, the aquatic student I had saved approached me. They had switched to a land-adapted exosuit for mobility. Without preamble, they said, no one else could have reached me in time. I nodded, unsure what they wanted from me. They continued, they think you're dangerous because you move toward threats. But you didn't hurt it. You stopped it. That's different. It was the first time anyone had framed it that way. The night before the event, I received the final outline. Multiple stages, each designed to test a different attribute: reaction speed, problem-solving under stress, endurance in shifting conditions. The last stage was classified as complex environmental hazard scenario, details to be revealed only at the moment. That told me they were planning something to push limits, maybe to see if I'd break. The day of the demonstration, the main auditorium was transformed. Modular walls, hazard emitters, gravity projectors. It was a multi-environment arena. Students filled the seats, faculty in the front rows, council members in a private gallery above. I stepped into the staging area, wearing standard academy exercise gear, no weapons, no tools. A neutral voice announcer outlined the rules. Proceed through each stage as quickly and efficiently as possible, without lethal force unless no alternative exists. Stage 1 triggered without warning. A burst of moving targets, some simulating civilians, others threats. I navigated the space, identifying and neutralizing hostiles while avoiding harm to non-targets. The simulation AI adjusted speed and unpredictability, but my focus narrowed. When the final hostile was neutralized, a chime sounded. Time recorded. Fastest yet in the Academy's history. Murmurs rose in stands. Stage 2 shifted the gravity field erratically, simulating instability. For most species, sudden changes in weight and balance induce panic or hesitation. Humans adapt quickly. We evolve with uneven terrain, shifting loads, moving prey. I adjusted my stance with each shift, using momentum instead of fighting it. The stage ended faster than they anticipated. Stage 3 introduced environmental hazards. Heat, cold, wind, shear. My body protested the extremes, but I kept moving. I could feel my heart pounding, sweat cooling on my skin, breath drawing deep and steady. The crowd's noise blurred into background static. Between stages, I caught sight of the council members, their expressions unreadable. The classified final stage activated. The floor split, revealing a confined maze filled with mechanical drones programmed for a coordinated pursuit. They were fast, and their stunners packed enough charge to drop most species instantly. I moved low, using corners to funnel them, dismantling a few with precise strikes, outrunning others. A stun bolt grazed my shoulder, muscle seizing for a fraction of a second, but I pushed through. The applause faded slowly, not because the audience wanted it to, but because no one seemed certain how to stop. I stood still, letting my breathing return to normal, scanning the faces around me. Some were lit with open admiration, others with the sharp edge of calculation, and a few with the flat expression predators wear when they're reassessing prey. The council members remained motionless, their attention fixed on me like the outcome of this day would decide more than one student's reputation. When I finally stepped down from the arena, an attendant approached with a water pouch and a medical scanner. I waved off the scan, accepting only the water. The stunner graze on my shoulder still tingled, but it was nothing more than a muscle ache. The attendant hesitated, clearly wanting to speak, then leaned closer and whispered, "They're not going to forget this." I didn't ask who they meant. It didn't matter. Outside the arena, the corridors were crowded with students who hadn't been able to get seats inside. News travels faster than any official recording. They stared, some leaning forward as if proximity might let them absorb whatever it was they thought I had. A few called out questions, how I moved like that, what kind of training I had, whether all humans could do the same. I ignored most of them, offering only curt nods. The more I spoke now, the more ammunition I gave to those who were already weighing me as a factor in some future equation. Valren was waiting for me near the faculty wing. His gaze traveled from my face to the mark on my shoulder, then back. "You exceeded expectations." He didn't sound pleased. I told him I'd simply done what was asked. He tilted his head, frills shifting. They'll debate whether that's a reassurance or a warning. He stepped aside, gesturing toward the council chamber. Inside, the atmosphere was different from my last visit. The members didn't ask me to recount events this time. They had already reviewed the recordings. Instead, they asked about my decision-making process, why I had chosen certain routes in the maze, why I had risked intercepting drones head-on rather than avoiding them entirely, why I had conserved energy in the environmental stage rather than pushing for absolute speed. I explained in the same tone I'd use for a technical report. Because conserving energy allowed for sustained performance in later stages. Because neutralizing certain drones prevented being cornered. Because routes that looked longer sometimes offered fewer choke points. The answers were simple, grounded in human problem-solving shaped by generations of survival under unpredictable threats. They listened, silent, weighing the implications. When they dismissed me, one of them, a broad-shelled amphibian, spoke as I reached the door. "The galaxy sees humans as unpredictable. Today you confirmed that, but you also showed something else. You choose when to act. That choice is what unsettles them most." I left without replying. In the following days, the academy changed in ways both obvious and subtle. Where before I'd been treated as a curiosity, now conversation stopped when I entered a room. Some students avoided my gaze entirely. Others sought me out with a new urgency, eager to align themselves with what they now considered a useful connection. A few openly challenged me, framing it as academic debate, but with an edge meant to test. I didn't rise to it. The demonstration had already said more than words could. One evening, I received an encrypted message from an unknown sender. The text was short, impressive, interested in cooperative projects. The signature was from a research division affiliated with the Union's defense network. I ignored it. I wasn't here to be recruited, but I knew ignoring it wouldn't make them go away. Valren began calling on me more frequently in lectures, not just for human-specific insights, but for comparative analysis between multiple high-threat species. He never referenced the demonstration directly, but I could sense a shift in how he addressed me, less as a subject of study, more as a peer with valuable perspective. It was a small concession, but in this place, small shifts in status mattered. The aquatic student I'd saved joined me for meals occasionally. They didn't speak much at first, but when they did, it was usually about the difference between intent and instinct. They'd been raised in a culture where avoidance of risk was a virtue, where action without consensus was considered reckless. Watching me move toward danger had unsettled them, but it also forced them to reconsider whether their survival depended more on waiting or acting. Word of the demonstration spread beyond the academy faster than I expected. Within a week, I was contacted by a human liaison on the station, warning me that off-world news feeds were framing the event as proof of human combat dominance. Some called it propaganda. Others saw it as a threat. None of them were entirely wrong. The liaison advised me to avoid public gatherings for a while, to let the narrative settle. I agreed, though I knew the narrative wouldn't settle, it would evolve. 2 weeks later, I was summoned to a symposium on interspecies cooperation. The invitation came from the Academy, but the guest list included representatives from multiple sectors: scientific, political, military. I knew what it meant. They wanted to see me in person, to decide whether humans were a stabilizing ally or a dangerous variable. The symposium hall was arranged in a circular format. Every species delegation clustered by environmental compatibility. I was seated with a mixed group of Academy staff and students. The discussions began with prepared statements about cooperation, mutual understanding, and shared goals. Polite words, carefully chosen. Then an elder from a long-established member species asked me directly, "Do humans seek to dominate or simply to survive?" The room stilled. I answered without hesitation. Survival comes first. What others call dominance often comes from the same instincts that keep us alive. We adapt to threats. Sometimes that means pushing back until there's no threat left. It's not about control. It's about making sure there's a future. Murmurs rippled through the delegations. Some nodded. Others exchanged wary looks. The elder studied me for a long moment before thanking me. The conversation moved on, but I knew my words would be repeated later in rooms I'd never enter. After the symposium, as I walked back through the station's main concourse, I noticed something new in the way aliens looked at me. It wasn't just fear anymore. It wasn't just curiosity. It was the awareness that whatever humans were capable of, we chose when to use it. That choice made us dangerous in a way they hadn't accounted for. Val Wren found me the next day and said quietly, "The council has decided to expand the human curriculum here. More will come. You've accelerated what might have taken decades." I asked if that was a good thing. He tilted his head. Good and dangerous are not opposites. Sometimes they're the same.